If anyone wanted to take this Kansas State Tulane game on face value, sure, Kansas State lost the game to a group of 5 team that's probably not going to be that good this year. We're not talking upper end of the group of 5. This is not Cincinnati or Boise State in its heyday or anyone like that. So it's a disappointing loss for Kansas State, but this is almost the history of this program. Bill Snyder, Chris Kleiman, where they will trip up against somebody in non-conference play. This happens every 3 or 4 years, whether that's an FCS school or a group of 5 team that they shouldn't lose to, that they're a 2-touchdown favorite against. And you can't take this result and say, well, this is going to be a walk in the park for Oklahoma. It may be because of the talent difference and Oklahoma looking like a solid top 10 team in the country, maybe even better than that, versus a Kansas State team that's we'll see how it all falls, but probably more in the 7 or 8 win category of a top 40 or 50 team in the country. So what I'm guarding against here is Oklahoma fans should know pretty well what Kansas State's capable of. And this is a pretty typical Kansas State team. They're not going to throw for much more than 100 yards per game, the way things have been for the last several weeks. Again, Adrian Martinez, it's kind of odd to speak to Jason's comment about Adrian Martinez earlier. Yeah, he's not really turning the ball over, but he put up like big numbers at Nebraska. His issue was turning the ball over and in key spots, but he put up pretty sizable numbers at Nebraska. Here, they're barely letting him throw the ball. First of all, they're throwing 18, 20, 22 times a game. And it seems as though they're playing the type games, especially in this game, where the other team's running the ball, using clock. So it's one of those games that before you blink, it's over and you just lost in a low-scoring game. It was one of these muddy kind of games where it just, again, air taken out of the ball. I liken it to Texas A&M and App State. And I rewatched that game just to believe what I was watching. And I saw on the stat sheet, Texas A&M ran 38 plays. Like they barely were on the field. And it's one of those deals where the other team's not really scoring, but they're keeping the ball away. And because you don't have, meaning Kansas State, an explosive offense, you're utilizing time when you got the ball and you're not doing anything with it. I just checked out the play-by-play on their final drive just to see. I'm always curious about this. So I didn't watch this game. Obviously, I was a bit surprised when I saw the score, and I went back and I was like, I want to look at the box score in this game. And the last time they got the ball, they hit a couple plays, 19 yards from Adrian Martinez to Malik Knowles, who's their best wide receiver. They got into K-State into Tulane territory, but they got into a 3rd and 9 situation. Deuce Vaughn goes for 3 yards. Then they don't go for it on 4th and 6. Oh, they must have had a penalty. So they must have had a penalty, which knocked them back to 4th and 12. So they kicked the ball with almost 3 minutes left in the game, thinking that they could get the ball back, and then Tulane just ran out the clock. They couldn't stop them. So just K-State, again, has been doing this forever, but you can't be lulled into sleep thinking they're a bad team, because they're not a bad team. They got a really good defense, and I expect that they'll show up for Oklahoma.
Right. No, exactly. And I think almost more than any team, Iowa State may be the lone exception. Kansas State has given Oklahoma more problems, over the last 5-6 years than anyone. So yeah, Oklahoma should absolutely, and I think they will, based on. But I know it's hard not to, if you're a kid, not to scoreboard watch and say, oh, these guys got beat by Tulane's, and to let your guard down a little bit. I don't think this coaching staff will allow that to happen. But I think
they didn't let it happen last week. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah. So I think
this team lost to Georgia Southern.
Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, I think you're exactly right with the track record that Kansas State has had against Oklahoma and being able to beat them in Norman and Manhattan both. I think they'll have that attention. Obviously, I think exactly what you'd mentioned with Adrian Martinez. He had to throw the ball a little bit more because they were down late, but his 21 completions accounted for 150 yards, so a little less than 5 yards per attempt. So yeah, they're going to have to get the ball down the field a little bit more. And Oklahoma's been pretty good against the run, so obviously they're going to key on Deuce to a lot bigger degree. But when you look at this game, I rewatched a little bit of it myself, Mark, and Tulane turned the ball over twice, and still, when you lose the turnover battle and you still beat a team on the road, but they were able to handle Deuce Vaughn for the most part, and just the Kansas State running game only ran for 186 yards total, and so I think the matchup and you had mentioned his name, Malik Knowles, is their best and most explosive receiver. So if you're able to handle him, but I think at the same time, as we mentioned, it's going to be a tougher challenge defensively, obviously with Kansas State, who's much better, obviously on the defensive side of the ball. Didn't allow a lot from Tulane, but Tulane's an improving team. But yeah, no one really, including me, I thought Kansas State would cover the I think it was 14, 17, somewhere around that number pretty easily, because I've been one of those that thought that Kansas State was maybe a little bit of a dark horse team that could possibly challenge in the Big 12 this year. But yeah, they're going to have like I said, defensively they're good enough, but so far they played well enough. But offensively, they're going to have to find ways to get the ball down the field in their playmakers' hands, with a lot of people obviously knowing and keying on where Deuce Vaughn is at all times.
Yeah, to be accurate on this, I must have gotten the many box scores mixed up in my head. Yeah, Kansas State in other weeks didn't run a lot of plays, but they did run 73 plays in this game. So they had offensive opportunities to get it done, and they just couldn't. And as you mentioned, in other games, I know like the Missouri game was a really good game, offensive output, and went to script in terms of what Kansas State wants to do. And I think Adrian Martinez only had to throw 20 passes in that game. But yeah, being behind or tied throughout the second half, they put it up 31 times. But yeah, 150 yards on 31 pass attempts is just not much of anything. And yeah, Kansas State falls at home by a touchdown